It's always a great feeling when games get constant updates, and for 2024, Sins of Solar Empire 2 has had it very good indeed. There was the Ruins of War update in November, another update that came in this month, the Unity Ascendant update, and of course next year there's a whole bunch of DLC on the way as well. Now over the past year or so, maybe a little less, this has easily been the best 4X style game that I've been playing, and you know me, I very much love space games. And this one is interesting, not just because it has a lot of depth, because it does, but also because you can set up very quick matches and just play some very brief sessions. And I'm going to do that right now. We're going to have that playing in the background as I talk through this video. Now this video is sponsored. My thanks to Stardock for sponsoring the video. Check out the link in the video description for everything you need to know. So what is Sins of a Solar Empire all about? Well, for those of you who have never played before, this is a grand strategy title. It's all about building up your own empire and conquering the galaxy and, well, ultimately conquering your enemies. Now, what makes this game particularly unique is that each of your, so we call them population centers, are centered around either a planet or a large asteroid. Now, these orbit around the central star, but you can see over the time how the orbit of these bodies affect the nodes, the travel conduits between the various different areas. And this, over time, will affect the play, it will affect the strategy and the tactical decisions that you need to make. For example, you might find a heavily resource-intense planet right nearby and populate that, but over the course of the game session, you find that orbits further away from you, eventually detaching and becoming connected to an enemy area. All sorts of things are possible with this type of scenario. Now, throughout 2024, Sins of a Solar Empire 2 did receive several significant updates, and I want to talk about these updates throughout this video and just give you a bit of an overview of all the things that have been added into the game, as well as give you a bit of insight into the things that are going to arrive soon. And here and there, I will probably talk about some of the things that are going on the screen throughout this video. And if you do want some more details on how the game itself actually plays out, and you want to see a bit more of a full-on playthrough, even if relatively short, you can take a look at my previous videos on Sins. You'll be able to find that linked either in the video description or elsewhere on my channel. Now, as I said, back in November, there was a pretty significant update to the game. It was called the Ruins of War update. And it's introduced actually 3 new non-colonizable gravity wells. Gravity wells being like the little areas I'm in right here. This particular one is centered around an asteroid, whereas the one over here is centered around a planet. The new gravity wells, however, that were introduced in the Ruins of War update were non-colonizable. That meant there's no place to actually build any civilian-type structures. So what were these gravity wells about? Well, they actually had something else in them instead. We got 3, the magnetic cloud, plasma storm, and radiation storms. Now, these unique celestial phenomena add somewhat of an alternate strategic depth to the gameplay, and this in turn affects ships traversing through them. So very much about strategy and how those gravity wells are placed in relationship to your empire and the empires elsewhere in the system. It meant essentially that this all added another layer of complexity to the structure of the different areas here. So, for example, with the magnetic cloud, there is one of those in this video further on. The gravity well here would reduce linear acceleration of ships by 50%, and this effect significantly impacts ship maneuverability, potentially slowing down fleet movements and making them more challenging to engage or disengage from combat quickly. The other type is a plasma storm. When ships enter a plasma storm, they are unable to launch strike craft. Now this limitation can be particularly detrimental to carriers, which obviously have other ships on board them. They launch the smaller strike craft, and other vessels as well that rely heavily on fighter and bomber support. This in turn forces players to adapt their tactics when navigating through these areas. And then we come to the third of these, the radiation storm. This particular gravity well disables passive regeneration of hull, armor and shields for ships within its area of effect, and this can be especially dangerous for damage to ships as they cannot naturally recover whilst inside these storms, and that potentially really leaves them over to vulnerable, or makes them vulnerable rather, to enemy attacks. So on the surface of it, it might seem that simply adding a few new gravity wells here might be a relatively small addition, but it's one of those things that really does add a new layer of complexity. Now, Ruins of War update also introduced new star types. These included White Dwarf, Red Dwarf, Blue Giant, as well as black holes. Black holes are always very interesting no matter what game they are in. So, White Dwarfs, what were these about? Well, White Dwarfs are stellar remnants that represent the final evolutionary state of low to medium mass stars. And the key characteristics of these stars are that they are extremely dense, with mass comparable to the Sun, but of a similar size to Earth. So yeah, that's what the White Dwarfs actually are, but what do they do in Sins of a Solar Empire? Well, they also serve as non-colonizable gravity wells. In fact, all of these new stars are non-colonizable, but that's obviously because they are stars. Now, they do all have some distinct effects, and some are potentially left open for future updates. Now, when it comes to black holes, these have pretty strong effects on everything. They cause reduced maneuverability, so ships here experience decreased speed and agility, but they also have time dilation effects, which slows down various in-game processes. Antimatter regeneration also happens in black hole systems, so this will affect the cooldown on ship abilities and weapon cooldowns. And then there's the weapon reload speed, which of course is also slowed down, and that should really have quite a dramatic effect on combat engagements. In fact, pretty much all of these are certainly going to have an effect on combat engagements. Now, there's also some new gameplay mechanic elements introduced into the Ruins of War. These include things such as phase resonance, long-range jumps, influence points as well. Now, phase resonance, this is a unique system that allows factions like the Advent to utilize special abilities, and these include strategic abilities which enable powerful moves that can turn the tide of battles. I haven't got any specific things on that because that's one thing I haven't actually tried out myself just yet, but just be aware that it is there. Long-range jumps are also a thing now, and these are about facilitating deeper exploration and quicker expansion across the galaxy, which basically allows for rapid reinforcement as well as the relocation of your fleets. It's also nice to know that the early game pacing has been somewhat adapted and changed here, which should allow for smoother progression in the earlier stages of the games. Now, this is pretty important because Sins of a Solar Empire 2 can be a very complex game. As I said though at the start of the video, this does really depend upon how you play it, because these game setups are so flexible. They can have some very short burst sessions or some very in-depth sessions as well. But either way, those of you who really want a little bit of a better flow or felt a little bit too overwhelmed initially in the game should have a much better time of things now since this Ruins of War update. So yeah, this is a pretty huge update, and it's one of those that was released for free. This won't be any additional cost beyond the additional purchase of the game. Very nice, as always, to see this type of content being released. So, in terms of what's going on the screen right here, we're doing pretty well. We've already making some progress, taken one gravity well already, colonised that, and we're now making our way through this gravity well into the ones that are networked to it. We just need to get rid of these hostiles, which are actually minor factions that are standing currently in our way. We're also going to colonise this asteroid, and then we're about to build some factories on the nearby asteroids and extract some crystals and metals. Now, a more recent update that came out in December, just a few weeks ago, is the Unity Ascendant update. Now, this one again added a few new gravity wells. Specifically was a colonizable gravity well that's filled with debris from long-forgotten battles. And then there's the space junk, this one a non-colonizable gravity well, which was also filled with remnants from past conflicts. This one, I guess, is more about a visual backdrop, unique backdrop there for people to interact with and fly around. Of course, even the non-colonizable gravity worlds do act as nodes for the overall star system, the overall environment in space. Now, the largest part of this update was the Advent Unity abilities. These were improved. They had factional themes added to them, as well as some new abilities. Now, I'm not going to go into too much depth on the abilities here, because either you really played the game heavily already, and therefore you'll have a good grasp of what these abilities are, or you're fairly new to the game, and, well, that information might not necessarily be too interesting to you just yet until you get deeper into the game. But the key point here is that yes, even factions, the different races that you play as, these also get updates along the way with this game. There was also an overhaul to a part of the economy here. Actually, this was a significant overhaul of the focused economy. Now, as we come to the end of the year and we move into 2025, the thing that's really intriguing me here is the direction the game is taking in over the next year. In 2025, there's a selection of DLCs as well as a couple of expansions on the way, and these should significantly enhance the game yet further than what we've already seen this year. So in terms of DLCs, there's two. The first one is Paths to Power. We've got a little bit of information on this one, and it should be coming in the first quarter of the year. The next DLC after that is called Reinforcements, and then we go on to two expansions. One of these is Times of War, and the other is Harbinger. And Harbinger really sounds an ominous title there, doesn't it? So let's go through each of these one by one. Unfortunately, there's not a huge amount of information on each of these yet, but that's pretty standard at this point. We can expect to see more information as their release gets closer. And with the first DLC getting pretty close, the Paths to Power, we do have a few details on this one. So it's going to introduce a series of new scenario-style maps. These scenarios will feature custom starting conditions, much like we've got already. They should also provide for a more goal-orientated style of play, and this will include unique victory conditions for each of the scenarios. Now, in terms of gameplay focus, they will offer different gameplay experiences compared to the base game, so yeah, that's going to be a nice addition. I'm quite looking forward to that. And the emphasis on those specific objectives should really add to some new challenges there for us. The overall aim here then is to create a somewhat structured and more goal-orientated playstyle, at least as far as this particular aspect of the DLC goes. Also, by the way, these are all a part of the game's first content pass, so if you have that, or if you pick it up, you'll get these all included for it. Moving on is the second DLC called Reinforcements. Now, like I say, not much is known about this one, but it is a ship expansion pack. So new forces here are going to join in to the game as each race gains 2 new units into the field. So yeah, basically this is about expanding the races that are already in the game, giving them new units and new ships, which might well introduce some new tactics for your play sessions. And then we come to the first of the expansions. I assume these are going to be larger than the DLCs. The Times of War expansion is a campaign expansion. It's a full single-player story that's going to relate to a story surrounding the Tech, the Vasari, and the Advent. It will allow you to discover the history of these races going back a period of over 11,000 years. And it's also going to feature a number of playable scenarios, some cinematics, and a bunch of new units as well, in addition to some other things. So it sounds like this expansion is going to be a pretty significant and pretty large update to the game itself. The next expansion after that, as we said early on, is going to be called Harbinger. And this one is likely to shake things up quite a bit because it's going to introduce a new 4th playable faction. Alongside this faction, the developers have said that we can expect to see new gameplay, new warships, as well as some new tech trees. Collectively then, it seems that Sins of a Solar Empire 2 is going to really grow into scope over the course of the next year. It's already a pretty big game, one that I do enjoy myself, but with all these extra additions, it should be pretty intriguing to see how it shapes up over the course of the next 12 months or so. Ultimately then, whichever way you cut it, it has certainly been a very big year for Sins of a Solar Empire 2. And whilst I've personally enjoyed the game a heck of a lot, one thing that I'm really pleased to see is the reception it's been getting from the player base. You only have to take a look at the reviews over on Steam and you can see it has a very positive score. And what's more, recent reviews are showing a positive rating of 89%. Now, if you're watching this video during the Steam winter sale, do take a look at that because there's a massive discount there. I think you can get it currently for a discount of 25%, and the same discount of 25% is also applied to the Premium Edition, which contains all the aforementioned DLCs and expansions that are coming out later in 2025. So there we have it. I hope this video has given you a bit of insight as to where Sins of a Solar Empire 2 has been this year and where it's heading next year. And of course, a bit of a glimpse as of the gameplay itself. Now, if you want to watch some more videos on Sins of a Solar Empire 2, they are also available on my channel. Thanks for watching this video all the way through. My thanks again to Stardock for sponsoring this video. I'll catch you all next time, and do take care.